All right, I think we can start with a quick intro and just talking about what we are going to talk about. And while waiting for more people to join us, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our call today. This is our first live VCM, and thank you for being here at the start of our VCM Market Outlook. My name is Kourosh, and I'm going to moderate the call today. And we have two things here to discuss about. First is our Voluntary Carbon Market Outlook, which discusses the supply, demand, and prices, and where are they heading over the next decade. And also, we are going to talk a little bit about our assumptions and how we did the modeling. And the second thing is that we are going to use the time today to talk about Canopy, our carbon procurement platform, which is designed to support buyers and sellers in the voluntary carbon market to help them go through the procurement process. One note before we start, of course, things that we talk about is based on our forecast and model, and we try to provide as much as insight that we can. But if you want to understand the full scope of our analysis, you can get access to our full report in our website. And please feel free to drop your question in the chat box here, and we try to answer all of those questions by the end of the call. Before we start, I'm going to just quickly touch on who is Climate Decode and what are the services that we offer. We are the organization, actually we are the company that help organizations spend every climate dollar wisely. We have two main products, TerraNova, which is designed for decarbon, and it helps actually industrial emitters to monitor, plan, and cut their emission by designing the dynamic map that help them to identify actual projects with the highest financial and emission reduction. And then we have Canopy that we are going to talk about it today more in detail. That is the residual emission management product, which helps companies actually to manage the residual emission after decarbonization. And then we have aligned advisory services that actually is designed to help decarbonization projects development through different carbon schemes, such as clean fuel regulations and voluntary market and CCS projects, MBS projects. We cover all of compliance and voluntary market across the globe, including EU ETS, UK ETS, WCI in Canada and the US, and also OBPS program, as well as all of the voluntary market across the globe. Here today, also joining Vaibhav and Abhishek from our team. Vaibhav is our managing director, and Abhishek also is our co-founder and lead of our APAC services. Among our founders and our team, we have more than 20 years of experience in corporate climate finance, carbon markets, and we have been working with more than 200 industrial emitters along more than 50 carbon projects and plus 10 carbon compliance. I hand it over to Abby to talk about our market outlook.
Thanks, Kourosh. Thanks a lot. I'll cover the market outlook here, and then I'll hand it to Vaibhav, who's going to introduce Canopy, which is our procurement platform. So let's start with the first slide here, from a pledge boom to a rest. How the market actually started. Because if you look at the last 5 years, it will not make sense because we need to see the full arc. From 2010 to 2020, it was a slow, steady scale up. And the market was working through this Kyoto era legacy. Those are basically renewable energy credits in industrial gas and other classic offsets. Then when 2021 hit, corporate net zero pledges surged around COP26, and there was a lot of capital that flooded during that time between December 2021 and the beginning of 2022 into the market on the assumption that the demand will keep compounding. And at the same time, issuance is rocketed to its all-time high that you see in the chart here, around 367 million tons, and with retirement around 161 million tons. That was the boom in the last 10 years in voluntary market, but it broke down in early 2023 in January when investigations from the Guardian, DataSet, and so reached that the large majority of various rainforest avoidance credits were not real. There were no additional abatement to it. And that was a reckoning in the market of VCM. We saw that the Red Plus prices fell nearly 27 to 33% by December in 2020. That was a huge drop, and since then we have seen that the market has been rebuilding. During that time, buyers didn't leave, and but they have resorted. Through 2024 and into 2026, we have seen ICVCM's core carbon principle that became the eligibility benchmark. Then came the Vera's VCS version 5.0 in June this year, and gold standard that has made the Paris alignment mandatory from this January, and a new cohort of removal focused registries like Puro and Isometric, Rainbow, Equitable Earth that are specifically building the removal market. And what comes with all this last 10 years and 5 years, what has built has on this side is smaller, cleaner, and more selective supply. If you look at the last 4 years of demand after the peak, it has been around 157 million tons a year on an average. And that's not a stagnation. The reason has been the market has been rebuilding, and buyers are screening hard for quality, and they're not able to find enough what they want. And this leads to the pricing. If you move to the next slide, please. One of the major things is in the voluntary carbon market has been integrity. And integrity is what gives you the price in the market. The labels that have been really important in the market since the last 4 years has been the CCVCM's core carbon principles are the eligibility benchmark now. 8 programs and 36 methodologies assessed, and it carries a real premium. For example, over the underlying activity of the same kind of project and credit from the same region, purely because it's been screened. Second comes the methodology, the new versus the old. Matters even more than the labeling. Instance, if you see IFM projects improve forest management on the ACE, we are in the last in the month of June, you have seen that it trades 27% higher than the under the updated dynamic baseline methodology than the static baseline vintages. And you see this pattern in soil carbon, where credits under Veda's new VM0042 methodology trade in mid-20s against the older ones. Same project, same vintage, different methodology, different pricing. And third, that has become a very much another benchmark in the market is ratings, rated versus unrated projects and credits. Ratings are input, and that routinely scores the same project differently. That serious buyers screen on at least two agencies, but unrated supply gets discounted almost automatically now, because a sustainability manager or procurement team in a corporate, they can't defend an unrated credit if claim gets challenged. Putting it all together, the shift isn't towards the lowest headline price, it's towards fresher vintages, label credits. Since the 2021 peak, the removal share of demand has barely moved from 6% to only 7% in this 5 to 6 years. But the CCP level share has gone under from 2% to 10%. And average vintage age has dropped from 6.1 years to 5.1 years. The volume has been flat when you look at the retirement, but the quality has moved a lot. However, the label only earns its price when it stacks up to other kits. We'll look into the dollar values now based on category and geography. You see these two charts here, one bar chart, another dispersion chart here. These are the data aggregated from June 2026. And what we see, that credit trade price has roughly 100x range. Legacy win credits have traded around 80 cents, whereas biochar has traded around $130 at on the spot range. There are engineered removals like BEX that trade between $200 to $450, DAX around $400 to $1,000, but these are mostly offtake deals, not on the spot market. What you see here in the left is on the all shows the spot market data, and what actually sets where a credit lands on the ladder is what it does actually. At the cheap end, wind trades around $1, hydropower, cook stove around the same prices nowadays. And the reason is the energy in the West projects where additionality is increasingly questioned and supply outstrips the demand. And in the middle of this says the nature-based and land-based credits. Because Red Plus credit is actually the cheap end of this band, around $5 to $6 because of the integrity concerns. Then comes improved forest management as IFM that sits around an average of $13 globally, taking this as a global price. ARR sits between nearly around ARR soil carbon IFM removals from North America since around 2020 between 18 to $22, whereas biochar spots market it has been trading around $130, and that's the end removal. And if you look at the right chart, we have layered it with geography, how same projects are priced differently. Explains a lot how credits are pricing again priced now. Same projects may be priced double depending on where it is from. The clearest pattern is the North American premium in afforestation with multi-species ARR that is average around $26 compared to $14 to $16 in Asia, Latam, and Africa. Similarly, you can see the same pattern with soil carbon. It's not universal, but there are continents and countries that get a premium or a discount. If a corporate wants to have a large volume of avoidance, they either go for domestically or they will go global, either in the global south or in LATAM. As therefore, the sourcing strategy and category strategy gets the same importance. As there is no single carbon pricing, it breaks down into geography and project type. And also, this is how this is being priced and looked into. But what is more important, how buyers are looking into the market now. If you move to the next slide, Kurush, if you see here in the registry data in the last 5 years, we have seen that there is a shift in the market. We have taken an example with North America here, because North America, when it comes to the VCM market, North America and Europe have been the primary buyers. And what we see with the North America, when we pull the registry data, historically buying a credit was meant buying cross border almost by default. Pooled across every buyer, the all-time home region share retirements was only around 21%. But since 2021, US buyers have moved sharply towards home jurisdiction supply, and their share of retirement sourced from US located projects has gone from 6% in 2021 to somewhere in between 45 to 52% range over the last 2 years. Roughly, that is eightfold jump. We cross-checked it against the registries directly. Retirements from the two main US registries, ACR and CAR, they have roughly tripled from 6 million tons to 19 million tons from 2021. In case of US, it's actually coming home. One caveat worth flagging here, the market-wide shares of US located credits still roughly flat. The US buyers with a small slice of market still dominated by Red Plus. So this shift is real at the individual buyer level. It just hasn't moved the aggregate needle yet. When we look at Canada, it's also slowly moving the same direction, but the sample is still noisier. Practically, this means that the sourcing strategy now has to plan around jurisdiction, not only project type and vintages. Where you are buying is becoming much more of a decision what you buy. Please. Thanks. Okay, now comes supply and demand. We have developed the supply and demand model along with the price forecast. But the most important part, how we are coming to that forecast. It depends on our levers and the methodology, which actually plays a really important role because it sticks to the ground on a realistic view. On the supply side, the lever is the methodology. We do not count only on issuances, but the issuances that psychology that is set by project type by project type. For example, Cookstuff gets hard haircut, about 40% retention because of the well-documented overtrading over the past few years. When it comes to Red Plus and improved forest management, the retention is around 55% on baseline inflation and reversal risk. Coming to super pollutant, that has been pretty popular in the North America, NTO, and the removals pass through 92 to 100% on physically metered tons. And that step alone is why our supply sits below raw registry roll-up. And secondly, what we focus the lifetime of projects when we are projecting the supply. Coming to the demand side, demand stacks 3 layers. First, the voluntary core, buyers already active today and they're growing slowly. Then comes SBTI and the OER kicks in. The removal obligation phasing in, optional before 2035. Then a hard obligation ramping to a company's net zero year. And the net zero driven durable buyings that the forward contracted years ahead of delivery, which is why it is showing up in our demand in forecast, but there are no retirements yet to 2026. And we have built this bottom up, not top down, trying to focus to things we can check, name projects, name buyers with disclosed footprints. We are not assuming that every SBTI committed for companies or the whole footprint gets booked. The three scenarios where we look into is conservative, base, and optimistic are really three settings of one variable: adherence, the share of the obligations that actually converts into a purchase. And that's a single biggest swing factor in the whole model. We have forecasted the model and we have divided it into avoidance. The avoidance forecast removals have been divided into nature removals and durables. We'll start with the avoidance one. This is one category that we can say is still long and it's still gonna be long because this one's is very well supplied. First point, if you see on the right side, the categories to watch is super pollutants. These are the ODS and N2O metered landfill, plus a new wave of jurisdictional red plus coming from the ART registry. No, it's not counting the legacy red plus that has broken down in 2023. And it's gonna stay long because of a deep 2021 and later winter shock that has still to be absorbed. There's a huge amount of supply of credits and available credits in the market that are setting. An eligible supply holds up around 227 million tons a year by 2036, and against a demand of 140 million tons. Avoidance is gonna stay comfortably ahead. However, there is a wild card here, that is CORSIA and Article 6. If the demand pulls in from on these same categories on avoidance, then I think it can pull it can flip the whole balance of the avoidance, which is currently long. And we are gonna grow a separate outlook and webinar on this in few weeks. Coming to the pricing when it comes to avoidance, we are seeing there is a bifurcation now, and that is the commodity avoidance are basically eroding the wind, solar, but the ones with integrity are re-rating up, are staying constant or being priced higher. If a corporate needs a avoidance credit, of course availability is not a problem, but I think the price and every discipline will stay strong for avoidance credits. Moving towards the nature removal, could you please move to the next slide, please? This is the forecast we have for nature removal till 2036 year. And this is where we see the first change when you look at the avoidance that has been long for a long time. And it covers afforestation, reforestation projects, soil carbon, blue carbon, land-based biological removal. And overall, there's a modest overhang now, but it works out by around 2030. Then the supply, if you see the chart from 2030, it starts to tighten. And by 2036, demand climbs up to 72 million tons a year against a buildable supply of 44 million. Two things that pull up demand here is the voluntary adoption of SBTI's OER step ahead of 2035 mandate, and more immediately, hyperscalers, AI companies, and reaching their net zero years, pulling demand forward. Since nature removal is often the fastest thing they can actually procure than durable credits, which takes build up time, and also there is no spot credits in the market. Coming to prices, blended AR moves around 21 to $41 by 2036 in our base case projection. And though the scarcity is still there, within the nature-based removal, fresh vintage and permanence decide whether the specific credit actually clears, not just that it's a nature removal project or credit. Then we move to the durable ones. On this part, basically any durable credit is the cost leader here. Biochar is one of the cheapest option for to buy in buy durable credits. There are other credits like bioenergy and carbon capture, enhanced rock weathering, direct air capture, and engineer or semi-engineer removal with permanence measured in centuries. Here how thin that this actually is. All time across every registry, durable removal adds up to around only 2 million tons in total issuances. That is around 0.08% of everything the VCM market have issued right now. And the retirement has been marginal because the delivery of the credits has not been done yet. And there's basically nothing on the shelf, therefore. And this isn't a demand problem, it's built on delivery constant. Deliv- Durable supply is modeled to rise from 1 million tons to 11 million tons in our projection by 2036 in base case scenario. And demand is running well ahead of that, reaching around 61 million tons. There is a roughly 50 million tons of gap without with no buffer behind it, unlike avoidance that has 8 years of stock from available supply in the market. What's pulling the demand right now ahead of 25, of course, is going to be AI buildup, hyperscalers reaching their own net zero years, and a handful of early OER adopters. And this demand is generally concentrated. If you look in today's demand, what is happening in when it comes to tradable market, 82% of the contracted forward book has been there with a single buyer, and I guess everybody knows it's Microsoft. That 11 tons is just a figure as a direction of travel rather than a locked in number. And price has been there has been a huge differentiation compared to nature based removal or avoidance. The minimum credits with biochar trades around $130, and we expect that prices may reach around 108 to $10 if production scales by 2036. In case of Bex and DAC, it will stay at premium because of the buildup of facilities and scarcity. And if there is and this is the only segment where forward contracting matters the most. And as there is no spot market to fall back, I think if corporates have to claim their 2035 or 2040 net zero, they have to start blocking the credits now. If you move to the next slide, we have not only projected till 2036, but we have looked into the whole demand till 2050 based on the SBTI and OERs and net zero goals. And if we actually zoom all that out, this is what it covers everything in one picture. The removal share of demand goes from 10% today to roughly 40% in 2036, and then to 82% by 2050. A complete inversion of the market you have seen in the first chart, where avoidance takes first. And this market that has almost entirely avoidance for nearly 2 decades to 2.5 decades is going to change mostly to removals. And the market value moves even faster than the volume because the mix shifts towards the expensive tons. We are roughly $1 billion market today in 2026, and that's heading towards 110 billion by 2050 in our base case scenario, growing on two axes at once. And overall, the drivers for the curve is compliance. That is going to ramp up commitments among companies that have already been made. SBTI's operation recognition step, Corsia, Article 6, these are the rule-based triggers laid on the top of hyperscalers' durable buying that are already running today. That's a commitment effect, and which is why we are fairly confident in this direction. Even with the real range around the piece, our conservative approach is around 400 million tons by 2050, and optimistic is around 2.1, 2100 million tons. And I'll point you to the full report where we have done sector by sector analysis for corporates, what they're buying, what their trend and what their strategy has been, and based on that and our focus, we have built the canopy, which Vaibhav will explain and show. I'll hand it over to Vaibhav.
Thanks, Abhishek. You have just seen the outlook of a market going from 1 billion towards 110 billion and becoming removal weighted along the way. But an outlook only tells you where the market is going. It does not helps you buy or sell a single ton. Today, we are launching the platform that turns that outlook into action, Canopy, our carbon procurement platform for buyers and sellers with intelligence layer underneath. Let me take you through both sides, starting with the buyer. This is our buyer's command center shown here as a configured buyer view. The process begins with policy because procurement only works when you set a target. A buyer enters its programs and obligations once, whether they are on SBTI, OER, or they have their own voluntary ambition. And Canopy calculates the residual emissions and the required coverage. For example, imagine a company having a residual emissions of 1 million ton, but the policy requires or SBTI requires a 2% position to be covered. Canopy translate that policy into a procurement number. So the team immediately see what has already been secured, what remains open, and when it needs to be purchased. In other words, instead of debating the spreadsheet, the screen answers the practical question: how much do I still need to procure? It also provides context. The buyer can see comparable companies structure a similar ambition, which project types they purchase, how their portfolio balances integrity, geography, durability, and price. This takes us naturally to the second step, which is the fit score. Fit score, as it sounds, turns the whole market into a relevant shortlist. Every candidate is ranked against the buyer's value chain, geography, policy requirements, and peer activity, and integrity flags of scientific overlay which are built in. For example, we take two companies with the same headline emission, one based in Canada, which much of value chain in North America, another based in the UK with a value chain concentrated in the UK and Europe. Canopy will not give the same ranking. It evaluates which projects are more relevant to where each company operates, where its emission and value chain sits, and what comparable companies in that market are buying. The point is not to show both companies the same projects. It is to show company the supply that actually fits and which is parallel to their value chain. From there, buyer moves directly into RFQ. The team can take a long list to a short list, invite suppliers, and receive responses in a turnaround time of 72 hours. Canopy makes those responses comparable. So if any supplier quotes a spot purchase, another proposes a multi-year offtake, the buyer can compare delivery schedule, vintage price methodology, risk, and contractual terms on same screen, rather than trying to reconcile them separately. Once the choice is made, procurement and reporting follow the same flow. The purchase order can be generated natively in the systems as they have, like Ariba or Coupa, while reporting layer produces the audit-ready regulation library and sustainability report blobs. The buyer journey is connected from policy to selection to RFQ to procurement and finally to disclosure. Next slide. Now let us look briefly at the other side. Many of you are carbon projects. The workplace is yours. You present your book, your portfolio, and our team prepares it through due diligence layer, whether it's already rated or not. From where you do not have to keep chasing demand. When a relevant buyer requirement matches your inventory, it comes to you, get found, get diligence ready, and respond to real. And for suppliers, Canopy is a free platform, free to respond. Next slide. By matching a buyer and seller is only as good as intelligence which we have underneath. The entire outlook which Abhishek described, the forecast, the market balances, the price pathways, are not a static PDF. It lives here in a continuously updated and interactable view shaped around the user's role in the market, whether it's a buyer or a seller. Our model data sets and forecast sits underneath this in a screen, which is refreshed every 2 weeks. For a buyer, the view is customized in three ways. First, it is customized to their sectoral level. What you see here is the technology and a data center buyer. The information is filtered around the demand patterns and risk relevant to that sector. Second is customized to the framework which is applicable to that buyer. This is screen, the framework is SBTI V2, which means all the policy feeds and news are accustomed around that. Third, it is the customized peer set. The buyer can see when comparable companies are moving and how their position in terms of their climate leadership as compared to the other companies or their peers. Consider one practical use. If a procurement team plans to buy removals in 2032, it needs to know whether weighting is likely to improve choice or simply increase their exposure. For the sector, the model shows 2036 market balance is minus 55 megatons. That is not a market static. For this buyer, it is an early warning that future demand may exceed available supply and that contracting strategy may need to begin earlier with a forward offtake. Market Watch turns the outlook into a decision tool, and because the same market looks different from other side, let us switch to the seller lens. Next slide, Kourosh. For developer, the same living outlook is filtered around the project. What you see here is an example of Red Plus in Latin America. On one screen, the developer can view observed price range, which is indicative. the named buyers active in that project type, the standing supply competing to their demand, and the policies and the updates and standards that may affect them. For example, a developer considering whether to sell now or hold a future vintage can see how much comparable supply is standing in the market, which buyers have purchased what type of credits, and whether a change in a VCS version 5 or PACAM could strengthen or weaken their project position. Each policy signal is translated into the question for the seller: what could this do to my price and my access to demand? It is the same model, same data sets, same bi-weekly refresh, but pointed at selling instead of buying. Developers no longer have to guess where their supply may be wanted. They can see through Canopy. And with that, I'll hand over this to Kourosh.
Okay, thank you, Vaibhav. I think the main takeaway today is that the market is being rebuilt around integrity, and our forecast also shows that actually pushes market in the long term toward removal credits. And as Vaibhav explained, we have built Canopy to help the buyers and sellers in the market to go through the procurement process, and we are here to facilitate the process. If you are interested in Canopy, please feel free to contact us, and we can give you access to all of its features, from the procurement process to our market watch features. You can just play around and see if it fits your needs at current stage. And finally, it was our webinar. We are gonna later in August 24th cover the compliance side of the offset market. We are gonna look at the Corsia Article 6 and overall Paris Agreement, and see that actually how those markets actually is gonna evolve around the integrity and other stuff that is happening in the voluntary carbon market. I'm gonna just wrap up the call today and wish everyone a good weekend. Thank you.